Hey, it's Professor Demersion here, and I wanted to show you what I want you to work on tonight while I'm meeting with each of you individually. So what I've created here is the exact same thing that you did for your homework. And by the way, if you ever want to, if you just want to take a break from seeing the fluid grid stuff, let me show you where that is. It's under Visual Aids here and Fluid Grid. So this is probably what you usually have if you ever want to get a break from that. You go into the View menu, Visual Aids, and then just you can toggle that on and off. Okay, so what I want to show you here is how to work with these two different types of CSS rules. One's called an ID, the other's called the class. The main difference between them is that an ID is for only one element on the screen. For instance, this header2 tag that we created, or header1 tag, this video element here, or this video description element. Each one of those we've already actually assigned when you made your first, remember when we did this insert fluid layout here? We assigned, when we put that name in, we assigned it an ID. And just so you can see what I'm talking about, do you see this thing right here? Each one of these is an ID, and what's cool is we can create a rule just for each one of these, and all we have to do is reference this ID name, and all of our CSS styles can be applied to that. The class, on the other hand, is one that you can assign multiple things to, multiple elements. So for instance, let's just say that I wanted to, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller here. I wanted to have this text box and this text box be styled exactly the same. Well, because it's two elements that I want to share the same kind of the same set of styles, then that's a great candidate for a class. Another thing you could do is maybe have the header and footer match in some way. That's another good candidate for that. So so what I'm going to do is show you how we can use these IDs and classes to really start to customize the shape, and you want to be thinking about how can I use this for my final piece. So to start with, let's just take a quick look and see how this is all looking. I'm going to preview it in the browser. I'm going to choose Firefox, and okay, it's looking good, but a couple things I want to change. See this heading text here, that's a little bit higher than I'd like it to be. I'd like it to be right about center. I'd like to move that down a few pixels. Also, what I don't like, do you see that there's no space in between here? I'd like to create like a margin, some kind of distance between these two. They're kind of slammed up on top of each other. And then in addition to that, I want to make a class rule that is for both of these, that they share a kind of particular look and feel. Right now this one's got italics and this one doesn't, so I'm going to fix that right now. So I'm going to go into the code view, and let me just take off the italics. If you ever wanted to see how did that get on there, let me show you where that is. Do you see this M thing? If you go Command I, it will insert in these, here's an M. I was doing the title of that piece should be italicized. So okay, but now when we look at it, it's neither of these will have italics on it. Okay, so let's begin. Let's first start with creating a CSS rule for this ID, and we're going to move that text down a little bit. Okay, so the first thing we do is we go over to our CSS panel. We're going to say new rule here, and this is the trick. We see ID right there. The other one was class, was the other choice. It was right up above. We'll do that in a second. Let's do an ID. And one of the important things, this header2 is where that text is, so that's what I want it to apply to. And the other really important thing, I'm going to take a second to just say that this is really important. Put it to the boilerplate, this rule, not the fluid grid CSS. So we want it to go to this one. the reason why is this fluid grid has a lot of the coding in it for when it goes to a tablet or a mobile phone or a desktop system. And so if you put it there, you might have to do it 3 times and it just gets really messy. So you just put it to this one, the boilerplate CSS, and you're good to go. So let's just say OK to that. And now what I want to do here, remember this, there was a PowerPoint that I showed you guys about the block. Check out the block one that I showed you, the block model, the box model, pardon me, the box model. And if we go here to the box, the padding is the key thing to remember here is the padding is on the inside of the box and the margin is on the outside. We're going to use the margin to do this one down here. We're going to do padding to do this up here. So what I'm going to say is that I want to use the padding. I'm going to move my name down like 10, 20 pixels. So instead of saying same for all, I want to say top. I want to say something like, I'm going to give it a 20 pixel pad, and yours may be different. It all depends on how big that image is for you. So, but I just want to watch up here when I hit apply, and let's see if it's looking better. See how it shifted it right down like that? That's looking pretty good. So I'm going to stick with the 20 pixels there. Now you could change the type if you wanted. You could put a border on this. You could do all sorts of different text play and things like that. But I'm just going to stick with that one simple movement. Now let's make another ID for the margin in between here, and this is going to be a CSS rule for the ID as well. And I can apply this to either the top box and put a bottom margin, or the bottom box and put a top margin. I'm going to pick the bottom one, media 1. You might have called it just media. Just select your one that just says media. So it's an ID. We're going to check again to the boilerplate and say OK here. And I'm going to go to the box because this is the box model. But this time, instead of going to padding, I want it to be outside of the box. So this is the key differences. This will be inside the box. This is outside the box. Okay, I'm going to take that off, and I just want it to be on the top. And this doesn't have to be huge, but maybe something like 10 pixels here. Okay, would be good. Now watch, if I apply that, we should see some separation between these. Okay, nice. You can see it right there. And you can customize yours to be a little bit more. I'm going to say OK to that. Now the next one I want to make is a rule for a class, and we're going to make these two the same. Okay, let's see how we do that one. I'm going to go back to this new CSS rule, and I'm going to, it's almost as if it knew what I wanted to do. Class, and then I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to make this my own name, because this is something that you assign it your own name. Text block, we'll call it. You could call it anything. Boilerplate again. Okay. Now for this one, let's say we're going to choose the type. We want the font family to be, I'll show you how you can add these special fonts, these web fonts to your thing shortly. You can do the size here. You can say we want it to be italic, and then we can say, you know what, let's go all small caps with this, and we can say the color of the font right now too. Okay, we're going to go with black font, and then I'm going to also, while I'm here, I'm going to go to the background image, and let's just say that I thought it would be a good idea to snag a color right in here and make this div have this background color, but it's a little darker than I want. You can see how it's RGB, but there's a new little trick, RGBA, that A stands for alpha, and the alpha, as you know, is a transparency. It's a level of transparency. So what I'm going to do here is this goes between 0 and 1. If I bring that down to like 0.3, it's going to be like a more mellow color. It's not such an intense version of that. So I'm going to say apply to that, and say OK. And so you can see everything for my text block rule here is there. Now, what you might be thinking is, well, how come it hasn't shown up? Well, what hasn't taken place yet is we haven't said that we want these two guys to be considered this particular class. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. Let me just hide this for a second. And so when you click on this guy and you click on the actual div box, not the text, you can see here when you get to the properties, you can change the class to text block. Okay? And now it assumes all those things. And I'm going to do the same one here. You could do the same thing to your header. It would just adopt to that, but you might not want to do that. So on this one, I'm going to do the same thing, text block. And now I'm going to save this. When you see that this little asterisk is up there, that means something needs to be saved. I'm going to save that here. You could also go into the File menu and say Save All. Now let's preview this in the browser. And we should see our changes. So we have the title lower, more centered with the image. We have a little buffer here in between these two. And we have italicized text with a background. The div's got the background color, small caps, and they're both exactly the same. So that's a quick little overview of creating IDs, CSS rules for ID tags and for class tags.